Table Talk is not your typical D&D TTRPG podcast. We are not here to run you through our whole campaign.
We're here to talk about everything else in the space of tabletop roleplay.
I'm your host, Alejandra Wilhelm.
And I'm also your host, Mariah Gresham.
And we're your tabletop roleplay girlies. Alrighty, and we are live with another episode of Table Talk. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, it is just me and just Mariah coming at you. I thought that today, actually, we wanted to talk a little bit about, I was thinking about this because of like talking to my partner and the kind of games that he is used to, where there is a kind of antagonistic relationship with the DM.
Yeah.
Not just like, not necessarily in a toxic way, but in a like, no, it is us versus him and his world.
It's very competitive.
Or their world, rather. And very competitive. And it's very much like every time you win against, you know, a BBG or the enemies or whatever that they've set up, it's like a personal win against the DM that has been trying to sabotage you, basically. And it is like a little bit more adversarial.
Yeah, it's like trying to beat a video game boss more than like the collaborative, very like story-driven collaborative shit that like we tend to run, which like both are valid and fun. They're just different.
Yeah, which I thought that would be kind of interesting to kind of go into. Because like I've had like a variety of different experiences. We've played at a lot of different tables. Thankfully, a lot of the stuff that we've kind of played since Table Talk becoming a thing has been more collaborative storytelling and all of that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Like because most of our friends tend to do that. We've had a couple where it has been pretty like combat driven, but yeah, I think also just for one shots and streams as well, it's easier to lean roleplay
for sure
because
you're trying to be entertaining, tell the story. But like, you know, one that I can think of is like we have a different like at home campaign. That you used to be a part of, but like have since taken a step back. But with our other GM, Teddy, from the jump, that was like...
Oh, yeah. The first session we played of that was like go time.
Yeah, it was very much painted as like, hey, and like, again, it doesn't have to be a negative thing. I don't consider it a negative thing.
It's not. We all consented to it being like,
hey, this is a
rock'em sock'em robot throwdown.
And I am actively trying to down your characters multiple times a session.
Yeah, we knew that going in.
We knew this is what we signed up for. But that is like the one time that I could think of that I've had more of that like antagonistic, adversarial relationship with my GM and the story that they're running. And the way that, like whenever I do win in a scenario or we come out of combat and we're successful or like things like that, like it feels like a personal win against the DM.
It's like there's like a gotcha moment. And it's like, when we were talking about earlier, like, I think it's interesting the difference between like, I think it really is that like, haha, like I got one over on you.
Exactly.
Kind of that like mutual respect thing that, because, you know, like in your game and in my game, like we have like narratively tense moments or we have moments where like we're running antagonistic characters or we're running conflict or whatever. But it's our style of running combat doesn't really lean that way, even when we're playing antagonistic characters. Whereas like in like Teddy's games, there's like even over the table, like we are happy that we kill like whoever. Also because he's put like the whole fucking box at the game store out on the map. Yeah. He had plenty of people.
All the goddamn minis in the world.
Yeah.
And there is like a moment of like out of character. I just look at him and be like, yeah, fuck you. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
Post the fuck up. And vice versa. Like whenever he feels like he's gotten one over on me or like my cleverness or like the spells that I've chosen or something like that. And he's like, yeah, fuck you. Like it is.
Oh, yeah. Like one of the last sessions I played where like he could not hit Maeve.
Yeah.
And Maeve was just fucking up everything.
Yeah.
Like I finished most of the things in combat. And then there was a point in the fight where it's like, I had taken no damage. And so she doesn't have a ton of health, but I still had like all my health. And he's like, well, I'm going to go for this. And I'm like, fuck it. I have all my health. Like, do your worst. And then he took out like half my health in one turn. I'm like, not fair enough. Like,
you know what? Yeah.
I said a thing and it happened. And that's how this goes.
I told you to post up and you did smack my ass.
Yeah. He like critted. And I was like, well, all right.
But yeah, it's definitely interesting to me, and like the different layers of that relationship with like your respective like game master or dungeon master or whatever, and how that affects the gameplay and the kind of story that you're telling.
Yeah.
Versus a more collaborative space, because like you said, like whenever I thought of this initially as a topic, I was like, I don't think my girls have that relationship with me.
No.
Even when I'm playing antagonistic characters, even when we're in combat or whatever, it feels still more collaborative more than anything else.
We're all kind of like, we're playing our characters and we're in the moment, and then it's the split brain of like us kikiing as people, like outside of whatever scene is going on, and then us like inhabiting our characters. But it is, even when it's tense or there's combat going on, everyone's like primary focus, because all of our interest is in like driving the story forward. And that's just like, that's our preference. Like that's definitely my preference with like games that I run, which is why I run the DM. And like, I don't like, for me personally, to try to, I think it's something where it's like, so kind of how we've talked about struggling with like playing antagonistic characters or like playing your big bads and like making them scary, where you're like, that's just not my dynamic with like y'all as my friends.
Yeah. So it's
like,
hard to get into that space.
Yeah. Like I just don't, we just don't have that like, gotcha, like dynamic. So if we did, I think it would be easier, but it feels weird and like bratty in a not fun way to do that, where I'm just like, hey, like this is too much.
You're like, come on now. Yeah. It's definitely, not something that comes naturally. And like, like with Teddy, again, because like I've known y'all forever. Teddy, it was like a brand new dynamic, and it just kind of was like, okay, this is what this is.
It's very like the dynamic is very like kind of fun, competitive, like jokey, snarky, all that is just the vibe, and it's very fun. It was easier to like play into that, and also I think like when we approach our characters differently in those campaigns too, because it is like, hey, you got to be maxed the fuck out for combat, and then also like they have backstory and there's plot things going on, but like there's also going to be a lot of, it's not going to be all plot all the time. Yeah. So you just come in with a different, it's like you're kind of coming into an esports match or something versus like doing one act play with your friends. Like that's kind of the difference, how it feels for me.
Yeah, 100%. And it is like, like I think it's also the tone that you set for your game, because like even from the beginning, I mean, we used to have two people that were like very baby new to D&D. So I established, I'm like, hey, like you are not at risk of dying. Like it will not be character death because you're out of school, and like
there's safety nets,
ample resources, because this is what initially it was more intended to like get them introduced to the game, into the mechanics, get them comfortable, and then I can start kind of rolling that shit out. Yeah. And then, those two people had to like leave because of like life reasons, as it does happen. But then when I was left with just you three fucking goblins,
out comes the body horror.
Yeah. I was like, hey, real talk. And even then it was still like, we still have safety nets, because I'm never out here to try to kill your characters. No. We have,
and that's
fundamentally far too much fucking time.
Yep, it's not the goal. We don't want any of like our 3 PCs or even most of the NPCs, the important NPCs, to die. Yeah, like that wouldn't serve the story. Yeah. Like there's other people that will be or built-in sacrifices, like most of my character's family, but that's for different things.
But like as we progress, I'm like, okay, like. It's kind of like, I like to think of it as like the video game effect of like, you're in the tutorial area, but if you leave the tutorial area, like when we go into a dungeon, like at a finale or whatever, I like sat y'all down and was like, hey, normally character death is not a thing. If that shit happens in this portion,
it can happen.
Like you're in the red zone where you cannot save, you cannot fast travel,
you can't open the map.
You can't open the map. You can barely open your inventory. Yeah,
but that is nice, because it does make us sit back and we're like, okay, like let's make sure we pick our spells correctly. Yeah. Let's make sure we get our weapons. Like let's approach this with some care and not just like
And for me, like the mindset is like, okay, we have those moments where it does feel tense. It does feel real. There are stakes. But then when we're back at like slice of life land,
Yeah,
you
we're
don't
not
really have to worry about.
Yeah, we don't have to track spells super closely because we're playing like over multiple days and it's very timey-wimey. It's like, it's...
I might pull shit where you're going to get damn close, but I'm keeping an eye on your health.
For sure.
Don't worry about it. Like,
For
you're
sure.
fine.
Yeah.
So some divine act of God will intervene at the narratively appropriate time. But yeah, and like, I have it set out like that. And then eventually, once y'all graduate, that's when we're like, okay, from here forward,
it's like a normal campaign.
It's a normal campaign. Y'all could die.
We're adults, like we're working, we're adventurers. There's
accidents happen all the time.
Yeah.
Like,
yep.
It's if the dice decide that y'all are dead that day, then there's not much I can do to save you.
Exactly.
But yeah, it is.
Which will be a fun like evolution to go through the school and like grow with the characters and then play them as adults, like actually out doing, things that where there's not bumpers.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, even then, I don't think there will be that antagonistic like dynamic.
I don't either.
Because I mean, I'm just as invested in these characters as y'all are.
Exactly.
I do not want them to die.
No.
And even when I have to inhabit like my baddies or whatever, like I think there is an understanding that like, when I'm the baddie, that's not me at you.
No, it's you inhabiting a character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As opposed to other dynamics where it's like, no, this is the DM trying to rock my
Yeah, some of us feel like the DM as a person is trying to fuck over you as a person.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's consensual and it's fun, but it's like, no, this is a personal attack on me, the human.
Yeah.
Because I got them last round. Yeah, like I've thought about the same thing of like, as we played more, like after Bex moves and we're all like living in the same city, and we can play VTM more consistently, and we get more into that. I'm really interested to see, because like so much of that is social combat. And like, I don't see a situation where y'all's characters die or are killed. And I mean, unless you just do some like
dumb shit.
Buku crate, like, I don't know, like insane shit. I don't
to the prince and slap her.
Yeah. And even then, I don't think I would kill you. I think I'd probably just like put you back, capture you, or put you back in torture. Like, because I don't want your characters to die. And it's like we've crafted stories, and like at that point, I've put you in the obsidian. I'm not making a new bitch. Like, you already have you. You're already in the web. But I am really interested to see how that combat will go. But yeah, it's the same of like when I'll have to do a similar thing you did with getting comfortable playing these characters and playing multiple faces of characters, where it's like sometimes they're one way, sometimes they're other, or it's like to one person they're kind and to another person they're cruel, or they lie and people flip and they have their own motivations, and like all of that kind of gaslighting manipulation stuff is both very, very good and like hard to do to people you care about.
Yeah.
So it's like that'll be interesting to play around with and see evolve. And also just like, yeah, sometimes she'll do be chaotic as fuck. So like maybe you're like, hey, I'm going to kill my sire when we're still underleveled for that. And I'm like, I'll support you.
Wrong, I might. Who knows?
Hey, you and I
don't fuck with
it's very much like on you going to the Sedgemoor, where it's like, do you do it on your own, or do you try to like go and get some like some ringers to help you?
Maybe.
Do you work out the intel for like people that might also want this person dead?
No, yeah. I think this is a sidetrack, but I think for Revna specifically, it's like, I think she's learned enough from Carmilla, who's like teaching her the ropes, and been like, I'm like, this is a vengeance worth waiting for. Like, I'm channeling what my brand of petty is, which is that like
Count of Monte Cristo, long game shit.
Gone.
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly.
if it's gonna happen, it is not gonna be out of a fit of rage,
which I'm very excited about, because I have a lot hanging in the balance around that dynamic that I'm like, it'll be interesting as you start piecing some of that together and like seeing.
I like to think that she applies a lot of like, I think she's very strategic.
Absolutely, yeah. Revna is smart. She's not. She's just a berserker.
Well aware of her disadvantage here and now, and is like, okay, if
she knows she's not the biggest fish in the sea.
I am not the biggest fish in the sea. I might be the hottest, but I'm not the biggest.
Hey,
And she's very like, no, I need to bide my time. I need to figure out who our power
Get
player
the lay of the
is,
land, make some
need
alliances.
to figure out how to like knock him off his pedestal enough to where I need the scales to tip.
Exactly.
And once the scales have tipped in her favor,
then
and
it's
she's
easier
done
to
like
do.
the work to set up the right situation, then
Yes.
like she's gonna wait
Which
for her moment and take it.
Which I'm very excited for. That'll be very fun.
Because she knows he's a prideful person.
Absolutely.
And she's like,
all kindred
it
are.
wouldn't be satisfying for her to just get him in a dark alley.
No.
And she's like, no, I need to see that man ruined in front of everything.
It needs to be like
he's ever
in
done.
front of people.
Yeah.
Like this is public.
Yeah. 100%.
Yes. I'm so excited for us to play more of that. I want to get back in my lore. I love it so much. And we haven't gotten to play it a ton. We've only gotten to play like a handful of times because of the distance.
Mm-hmm.
But I need to like run a little one shot because I'm like just
honestly not been gnawing at the bars of my enclosure.
I know. I need to do that and I need to reply to your OSRP, which I think I have not done because it was like Revna and Riley, and it was left on a very like opportune point where I'm like, I have to not fuck this up. And then my life got stressful and I forgot about it.
That's fine. The OSRPs are meant to be there in stasis for us to get back to when we're able. But yeah, there's also the element, obviously, that like, although it doesn't always have to be this way, there can be a more negative aspect of like the antagonistic
for sure
situation.
There's a fun line. I think anyone who's like trolled the table disputes section of Reddit, and when I say anyone, I mean me in particular, because I do be living rent free there, like sees where like there's a point where it's like, this is fun and funky and a spicy little cute dynamic, and then it's like, oh, this is getting into like weird power complex territory that is not fun for anybody.
Yeah, and it can be, again, this is also like dependent on, that might not be the table for you or the game for you.
If you're the DM, you might not have the right players. If you're a player, you might not have the right table or DM. Like, it's not necessarily personal fault with that human.
Yeah.
It'd just be a compatibility thing. It might be personal fault with the human. They might be a dick. I don't know. But it might also not be that.
Exactly. Like there can be elements of like personally, I think like it's I'm trying to go get my players. I've known people that discuss it. They're like, no, I'm trying to TPK every time.
Yeah. Or like people who like DMs who get like really mad, not to like bring up, every time I circle this, I feel like we harken back to the Speak with Dead travesty.
I'll die on this.
That specter like haunts us always and is always near. Whenever I start thinking about DMs, like not wanting like or trying to nerf spells or whatever, like, and not even necessarily like, I'm not saying if like, oh, you don't like AoE healing or touch healing, or if you like agree at the onset that you're like, hey, like this spell is gonna work like this in my world. Not talking about that. I'm talking about like in game when somebody like a player pulls something and it kind of wrecks your shit.
It's like oh shit, I didn't plan for that.
And it like, knocks you on the back foot. But then like instead of just kind of taking it on the chin and being like, all right, like here we go, you sort of twist it and you try to be like, well, that's not how the spell works. Or like, you can't do that. Or like, I remember one on Reddit was like, a DM didn't want to let their players like Divine Smite as a bonus action or like on top of a spell or whatever, because they said like that's not how it works in Baldur's Gate. And it's like, well, that is how it works in Baldur's Gate 1. And that is also how it works in, I know I'm not saying that correctly, so like don't rules lawyer me. I read it like a week ago.
Don't rules lawyer me. I'm literally just a girl.
I'm just a girl. I'm back at work this week. All my brain cells have gone to that. But yeah, where it's like, okay, that's like that. There's a line I think where it's fun to DM games. But it's like sometimes I think people DM games because they want to like they have a story that they want to tell.
Yeah.
But they don't, it probably would be best served to write it in like a novel or like into fucking Wattpad or AO3, whatever strikes your fancy. They don't want to do that though. They want to have basically like a theater department set up to act out the image they have in their mind.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not what TTRPGs are.
No, because what inevitably happens is like these are free-thinking people.
Yes.
That will take the scenarios that you give them and see it in an entirely different way than you ever thought.
Yep.
And then do something completely different with it.
Yes. So if you're like so extremely attached to any aspect of your world or any like particular set of events happening in a specific certain way, like that's probably gonna get fucked up.
For sure. Yeah. Like, yeah, I think the scenario that we're referencing with the Speak with Dead was a situation where like I could tell we were looking at like the dead party of one of the Dreadlords.
Yeah, this is back in our Ravenloft game. We were like at this like mausoleum looking at like
being able to actually speak with them and not just look around for clues and try to like figure
well, I mean, that is looking for clues. Like, it's not have a co-op State of the Union address with the dead. It's ask the dead like 5 questions or whatever the spell says. Like, there are limits on it.
For sure. And like there are already limits on the spell because that is what the game is designed to do.
Yeah.
But I could tell it was something that he was like,
he didn't account for.
Didn't want me to have it.
Right. And he's like, that's gonna fuck up my shit. And he got mad. And you could tell he got like, not like, oh man, like you've knocked over my sandcastle. But like
it was me and him debating about how this spell works.
Yeah, he actively got mad. Which like also bothered me because I'm like, hey, it's a fucking game. Chill out.
Yeah. But yeah, that was probably like a more like negative antagonistic moment that I had where because I was literally like, what the fuck do you mean?
Right.
Like it can't work because he has no throat or tongue to speak with.
Yeah.
It's a fucking corpse.
And it's magic.
Yeah.
Magic is real.
Magic is real in this world. Let me talk to it. Like, what the fuck? Yeah. So, or like, I know, like my partner had mentioned there was like a scenario in one of his games where a GM basically gave like a BBG some fucking weapon that like, I don't remember the logistics of it, but it was basically like, if you get struck with this weapon, you are basically like kaput, dead. Like if he hits, you are dead. And like your soul,
you get hit with the bad stick.
Your soul gets just like Capri Sun sipped into this fucking sword, and you cannot be resurrected.
1, extremely Freudian. 2, problematic on other levels.
But yeah, like why give that to?
Like, what is the narrative purpose of that?
Yeah.
And I think there is something where it's like I try to set decent standards for myself because I read a lot. I like to write. So it's like I try to craft things in a way where I'm not giving myself cheats, right? Yeah. Because I think it makes the story less interesting. And so there is, I mean, sometimes like, you have to come up with something on the fly and it's maybe not the most ingenious thing that ever like struck someone's ears. But there is an element, I think, of sometimes just like lazy storytelling.
Yeah.
Where it's like, why do you want the finger of God sword that can just kill anything it's like what is the narrative purpose of that?
And I think like at least from my inference like the sound of it was very like it is that antagonistic in a like negative
toxic antagonistic
because it's like they have a story they want to tell and they want to ensure that their players don't kill off this character before that person is ready for them to die or whatever, but are willing to do so at the cost of like any other player, basically.
Which is insane. Like you can give that NPC plot armor if you want. You're the DM.
Or he just fucking teleports away the second that he's getting a little close to death or something.
But like that's it's like
give him Horcrux.
You touched my rice bowl, so I'm gonna break the fucking table. Yeah. Kind of thing. Where it's like that's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is like from what I know that campaign is now no longer like running.
Oh, did they?
Yeah,
that's probably good.
But I think they just like wrapped it up or something.
Which like to play the devil's advocate a little bit, like we both run games, like it is a lot of work to run a game. Yeah. Like it's a lot of thought and time and prep. And like it is laborious. And if you are the only person that does it for like years and years and years, like you get burnout. Like burnout is a very real thing. And so sometimes I think also on top of just being a person with a job and like life circumstances that are going on. So it's normal to have like maybe moments of frustration. But I think at any point when you're not communicating that and you're taking that out on your table, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Like because that becomes like an ownership
Mhm.
issue, like not to therapize everybody, but like that's because it's the same with players, right? Like because it's the same with players, right? Where like if you have a bad day and you like or a bad week or whatever, and you come into a session and you just start, I don't know, like you do something that is like antagonistic to what the party is trying to do, or like you work against the party, or like pull some out of like mess up other people's experience,
Mhm.
then that is a beyond the table problem
Yeah.
that you need to like address.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing is like, I don't know, like it also depends on like the kind of game that you're running and the kind of environments that you're in. Cause like, we were in like our old campaign, the Ravenloft one was highly antagonistic because we're in a grimdark scenario and he's got fucking Strahd that he can just pull out on us and like smack us around all the time.
The premise was already it's the same way like Curse of Strahd is kind of a meat grinder. It was similar to that.
Yeah. So it's like there is a little bit of like the tones that are set, but yeah, like that specific scenario on top of like I think there was like a couple other instances where like there was a bit of like gotcha.
Oh, I know for a fact there was. I'm just trying to remember them and I can't. Because
and that can start getting into roads where
it's like we have personal issues outside of the table and you're carrying this over into the table
100%.
And then like being like, no, what do you mean? Like it's not, and I'm like, don't
gaslight me.
Don't fucking gaslight me. Yeah, exactly. Or it's like, I mean that situation was a mess in and of itself that is not really about that person's DMing style, just as much as them as a person. But I don't know. Like I feel like it's a fine line. Like there's like there's a million different ways to run a game. There's a million different ways to like show up in and participate in a game, and like they aren't inherently wrong for the most part. Like some things are just like wackadoodle crazy, and you're like, no, you shouldn't be doing that, and if you are, you should maybe
consider
think about why. Yeah, or like bring like certain themes and stuff into games and stuff. But like other than that, I think a lot of them it always comes back to like communication and compatibility with people, and it's like that is hard because it's hard to find that. And it's especially if you want to play in person, that can be like it's hard to make friends as an adult and like all that jazz. But it is a thing where I think it's important to make sure that everybody wants the same experience. Or I think it is harder if you're trying to run like a mixed game, kind of like Teddy does, where it's like we have moments that are that like fun and consensual antagonism, and also you have like plot heavy moments.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's hard to switch back and like be super in character and plot driven. Because part of your brain's like, hey, when's that ghost coming to like hit me in the back of the head? Like, because I feel like he's near.
You're kind of always a little bit on edge because like I remember like the moments that he would be like, all right, well, like we'll have like some time to like talk to each other, and all of us are like,
I don't trust that.
Yeah, no, I'm ready for something to stab me in the back, or
you're
for
like,
us to be teleported.
So you can run me over with a carriage. Like something's gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
It's not.
I can't have my meet cute.
No,
and expect myself not to be shot in the middle of the road.
It's gonna kill me with a gun because it's the Old West, the fantasy Eldritch Old West,
basically. There's also like an element of the dynamic where it's not necessarily just the antagonism, but like for like the out of character beef that can happen, in the sense of like I've run into this a few times whenever I don't necessarily agree with like a ruling on something.
True.
And like end of the day, at almost any certain scenario, it's just like, it's their game, they're running it. Like,
sometimes you aren't gonna agree.
I can make my case, but
exactly.
It is what it is. But there are times when like there can be situations where I just genuinely feel like a ruling is unfair.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, we're all like human, and sometimes you don't see things, the full scope of something, or like you get tunnel vision, and like it can happen, certainly. Like sometimes there is a certain amount of like, hey, I'm throwing out nonsense, and if you accept it, great. If not, that's fine too. But sometimes you were like, hey, no, like, I remember there was like one with Valindra, I think, where it's like she stepped on a plate or whatever to like set off a trap. And you're like, that was the first game you had played with that. It was like way when you first started playing with it.
Yeah,
you're
it was like
you're like, I didn't know.
Sessions of growing pains.
Yeah. You're like, I didn't know we had to like take a fucking seismic reading of the floor. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, it was like,
I thought we could just walk.
He was like, yeah, no, there's a map that we had, like there was a digital map and it was like some kind of like glyph on the ground or whatever, but like in the describing of the area didn't really like mention much notably about it. And then when
it wasn't like raised or like, I thought that was just a fun tile.
No,
like,
and then like I just like guided my character across over it or whatever, like literally in a corner of it. And there was enough space for her to like step around it, but I was just clicking and dragging my.
Because you're on like Roll20, so you're just
it's a digital thing. And he was like, "Okay, well, roll me this." I'm like, "Why?" And he's like, "Because you stepped on this thing." And I'm like, "What do you mean with this thing?" He's like, "Oh, the giant glowing like pentagram on the ground." I'm like, "You didn't say there was a giant glowing pentagram on the." If it's my character and she sees a glowing, we're in a fucking ruin and there's a glowing ritual site.
Like, Valindra's not that kind of white woman.
She's not stomp on her little fucking red bottoms on that bitch.
Yeah.
No. And he was
her
like,
fucking Catwoman boots.
Yeah. And he was like, no. And I'm like, well, she would have walked around. He's like, well, you didn't say you walked around. And I was like, I'm sorry. I'm not used to games where I have to narrate
everything.
Every little
to like cover your ass. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like, I didn't necessarily like find that super fair in the moment. And I did get like pretty annoyed.
Yeah, I remember you messaging me about that, and I'm like, no, I like that would have annoyed me too.
You are my go-to person when I'm like, am I crazy?
We're that for each other, absolutely, which is why we're best friends. It's like, am I insane or is this valid? Because it could be either.
Exactly. Or like there was another element. Me and this DM are perfectly fine now. We've had plenty of conversations.
This was like years ago.
Yeah. Shout out to Carson one time. But there was another instance where I think this was the very first session too. And it was, I think both of these happened in the same session. And it was the first session.
So you're like, this ain't off to a great start.
So like that happened. I got a little irritated, but I was like, whatever. And then we went somewhere else, and again, because I was like pretty inexperienced D&D wise, and it was like the first time I'm playing an assassin rogue. I notoriously have this issue where I will pick a class to play, and it will take me such a like learning curve to actually figure out how
that's everything
to play them in combat.
Oh, especially to play them optimally. Yeah. Like, you can bumble your way through it, but like
so like what I know now, what I didn't know then, is I was first in initiative.
Yeah,
and I should have gone and fucking murked somebody, but I didn't know that. And so I was like, well, they're in a room, there's a very tight corridor, and then we're on the other side of that thing. And I basically wanted to kite the enemies into this corridor so we could bottleneck them.
Yeah, like a video game. So we'll fatal funnel.
I was using video game logic for D&D.
Which can work. Makes sense.
Did not in this case. So I basically was like trying to kite them and then hid in a corner, but I didn't take any like
you didn't attack
it actions or anything. And he made like an offhanded like, okay, so our rogue does basically dick all with her turn.
That would have also pissed me off.
Yeah. And I like took that a certain way, and I was like, I did not like that.
Yeah.
And that started a little bit of like that like I was like, I don't know.
Because like, and I don't like, knowing what I know of Carson now, I don't think he meant it in like a neggy way.
Not at all.
But it's like that is like, when you told me about that, that's how it sounds. And the quickest way to get me to like see red rage is to try to fucking neg me.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll burn your house down.
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck do you think you are?
I remember like talking to you and talking to our other friend that invited me to that game.
And I'm like, like, devil's advocate, let's not assume malice if we don't know how it was meant.
Let me check myself before I wreck myself.
Yeah.
And then,
you weren't in person, like you couldn't see body language.
And like eventually like I brought it up to his attention. We talked about it and he was like, no, I completely see like how that was.
Yeah, he handled it as best
and like
as
it's also the fact of like he was used to playing in games with all men. And like,
true.
The dynamic is normally pretty teasy when you do something dumb.
Yes.
And
that's not, it's certainly not, we play with all women, right? So it's like, that's not our dynamic at our table. And that's not to say it's necessarily wrong.
Yeah.
But it's also a thing of like, you didn't know them then.
Yeah. So know them like that.
Yeah.
And
like,
also,
you're Latin, you can handle being teased.
I could roast somebody in
Yeah.
heavens. Like,
You just
don't get
didn't
me
know
wrong.
these people.
Yeah, I just don't know people like that. It takes me a while before I just rip you apart
Exactly.
in a loving manner. Yeah, and so it was very much like we realized he's like, yeah, like, I'm sorry, like, this is just kind of how, like, I'm used to talking to people that in my games or whatever. And I was like, yeah, and like, to be honest, especially like as a woman gaming in general,
bit of a
TTRPG
sensitive
or otherwise, it is a little triggering sometimes when a man like teases you about your inability to be good at a game when you're learning. And
my new spiritual food is sorry, we'll get back to the topic, those TikToks where it's like women playing like fucking Valorant or whatever, and the men are like negging them and they just murder everyone.
They just murder everything, and I was like, in sight.
Hum num 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 num.
Yeah, love that shit.
They say nothing and just kill people, and I'm like, as they should.
Yeah, but it is a sore spot for me whenever like I'm trying something new, and like especially in a male-dominated room. And,
you're stepping out on a limb, and it's like, hey, can you not maybe take the first available swing? Yeah. Like, I wouldn't do that.
Let me get comfortable.
Exactly.
And then you can rip me apart.
Like, when we have, like, when we play VTM, like, Drew comes and eventually plays, like, a one-shot, like, VTM one-shot with us. I'm not gonna neg Drew about not knowing how to play VTM.
Exactly.
Because why would I do that?
Yeah. And, like...
that's not conducive.
Yeah, and, like, I've had conversations with Drew whenever it was, like, our table is so different from the table that
even when
at.
He sat with us to do Alyssa's one-shot. Yeah. Which was, like, that's all Oops All Combat, like, because that's just the vibe of those, and they are a meat grinder. So that is a little bit of like a light antagonism there, but it's all very fun. It's like, but yeah, we're still very collaborative. Yeah, and I could tell he was like, what? He was trying to like egg Alyssa on. He's like, yeah, do it, coward, like kill me or whatever, do this. And I'm like, and Alyssa would just look at him. Yeah, and she's like, that is not the vibe. She's like, son, my sweet summer child, sit your ass down. Yeah, before I wreck your shop. You don't know what you're asking. Before I pulled Tiamat out of the china cabinet. Giant fucking bone dragon like murdered all of us. We had to run. But yeah, and it was like, it's just a different vibe than what you're used to. And like, it's interesting having to adjust to for sure, to those different dynamics and stuff. Like he wants to run something for y'all at some point. Yeah, that would be fun. Very much. And he's like, but I gotta get in the storytelling zone. Like I gotta be in a whole different I'll mindset. Run a VTM one shot that he can play in, and that will help. And then But yeah, it is a time for sure whenever you're starting to kind of walk the line of the little like fuck you moments, and when is it getting a little bit too serious and too much, or it's like I'm just flat out not having a good time because of how it is. And that's sometimes like there's a point for me with it that I'm like, and this is my personal preference, this has nothing to do with anybody, but like it takes more emotional energy for me to be in like those like games than it does to be in like a collaborative storytelling game. So it's like I can play Strixhaven for 10 hours and not sweat. Easy. Just but like a couple hours of like heavy combat and I'm done. I'm like, that's all I got, Chief. I'm tired, Grandpa. Like, and it's so like I know that of myself. It's like, which is helpful now, like, and that's been like a huge blessing of everything with Table Talk and meeting all our other friends in the industry and playing in so many different types of games and so many different types of DMs. It's like I've learned a lot about what I prefer and what I'm best at in a game. And it's storytelling, one act play with your friends. Yeah. Because I have more bandwidth for that. And it's not to say that combat heavy is in any way wrong or bad, because it isn't. It's fun. I just do not have as big of a tank for that. Yeah. But in general, like it's just finding what works for you and like what you enjoy. And I think it can be fun to like play around with some different styles too, especially as we like DM more. It's fun to like test out different things. I'm excited to, because I'm getting more progressively comfortable in my bad guy. Yeah, you spooked me the last time I played. I was like, I feel like I'm in trouble, and I'm I'm not one in this world, and it's not my scene or my character. Yeah, I'm getting a little bit more comfortable. Like, I want to have like a good. My goal is to have a moment as good. This is ambitious, but as good as Brennan's little
monologue.
Oh God,
Calamity,
yeah.
where in order to reach a handout to someone, they have to
be
be beneath you. Like, I want that.
That vibe for
I
like
want
the
that
finale
energy.
of Callista's arc.
Yeah, basically. I'm trying to get myself there. But I'm getting more comfortable. I'm getting more at ease with it. And just in general, the prospect of like, as we progress with our campaign and you're facing bigger, badder people, I want to be able to do those characters justice and like make y'all feel like there is truly like, oh no, fuck this guy or fuck this woman or fuck this person.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. It's like, I want there to be stakes and like, I want you to have an emotional reaction to people in
when
the
this
world.
character shows up in a room.
Yeah. Exactly. And then, which is like probably why I love Redmond Riley's very antagonistic dynamic, because it's so fun that that's
she's
built
like,
in.
Man, if I could.
It's on site. Yeah, she's just like barking in the back of the room, and Camilla's like, please God. Which is so fun as a DM to like flip between those. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like I want you to like form attachments to people and think you know them and then see a different side of them, and it's like, oh fuck, like everyone's fucked. Like I'm so excited for that.
Yeah, that's gonna be good. It's gonna be real good. Alrighty, well, I think we're coming up on time. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
And we will see you next time.
Bye.
Table Talk is a podcast brought to you by Mythos Media Productions, bringing you a new episode every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcast. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Table Talk RPG, or check us out at our website, mythosmediaproductions.godaddyscites.com. All business inquiries can reach out to us via email at info@mythosmediaproductions.com.